Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to Lisa Tupetz. Lisa is a winemaker, distributor, and the founder of Tupetz Wine Collection, a German wine import company with the goal not only to sell German wine to those of us here in the US, but also connecting people with family-run German estates through authentic, low-intervention wine. Lisa was raised in Germany and educated in enology and viticulture at university there. I'm not even going to bother saying the name of it because it's German. She moved to San Luis Obispo, California in 2018 to make wine. But after suffering a work injury in 2020, she took a break from winemaking and she was craving a taste of home. At the same time, the future of wine distribution within Germany, which relies on outdoor festivals and big social gatherings, was quite uncertain due to COVID. So through this mutual necessity, years of friendship and dedication, Tupetz Wine Connection was born. I actually invited Lisa to join the Cork crew for a virtual tasting and guided tasting of her German wine, and she brought in a German winemaker as well. So we had this really fun conversation, and I got to try some really great wines that she brings in. We had such a fun time, and she was so knowledgeable on all things German wine that I knew I had to have her on the podcast. So in this episode, you'll hear part one of the interview. We're going to talk about how Lisa's love for wine started actually with a trip to New Zealand, simply to learn English, why it's important to ask questions about the wine you're drinking and not just look for words natural or organic on the label. We'll learn there is far more to German wine than just sweet Riesling and so much more. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. Well, let's jump in. So I always do a little intro beforehand, but I also think it's good to give you a chance to introduce yourself. So do you just want to share who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Lisa Tupetz, and I live in California, even though I'm not now in Germany. And I import wines from Germany. I moved to California in 2018 and started a couple of years ago with my import business. So that's what I do currently, importing some fun German wines and sell them across the United States.
I love it. Okay. One of the biggest questions I always like to ask people on here, because I find that people get into wine in different ways. So I'm always curious, how did you fall in love with wine?
Okay, well, that's actually, it was not planned at all. I was never really into wine when I was, growing up in Germany. I never visited a winery until I was in New Zealand. So I finished school in Germany, and then I wanted to learn English and I wanted to study business. So it was my main idea, either business or chemistry. So this was my two topics at school that I was interested in and whatever, wanted to focus more on. And then I wanted to go to business school, which would have been taught in English. So I was let's go somewhere, where they speak English. My mom's best friend was living in New Zealand at a point. She moved out there in the, I think, 80s or something. And so I went to New Zealand right after school, planning on staying for 3 months, just, pick up some English, go back to Germany, study business, and then, go from there. And so I went to New Zealand right after school, and I was just working at my mom's best friend's wine bar and restaurant. And the first few weeks, I was pretty much just going to the wine bar when she had to go to work, and I was hanging out with the sommelier, and he would pour me some off-dry wines and then some drier wines. And then he was just every day is so what do you remember from last night? What do you, how was the wine? What did we drink? And kept questioning me all the time and kind of pushing me into you should go to the supermarket tomorrow and then you should smell all the vegetables and all the fruits. Kind of remember what you smell. And then you come back here and then we will taste Riesling and a Sauvignon Blanc. So he was kind of making sure that I was able to associate certain smell with a certain wine and certain grape varieties and stuff. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And so I kind of like got, a really intense training without even like, asking for it, but it's like really interesting. I was like, this is fun. And I was like, a great sommelier too. He's actually from France. We're still in touch. He lives in Australia right now. And yeah, so I kind of got into like, the full wine thing. And then one night Lisa was like, well, what do you want to, my mom's friend, her name is Lisa too. I'm named after her. And then she was like, so what do you want to drink? Choose any of the wines from our by the glass list. And they had a huge by the glass list, I think over 70 wines, like really cool wine program. And I was like, I would like to have this, fancy Sauvignon Blanc from Block Point, like barrel aged, like single vineyard section wine. And I was like, I would like this one. And then she was like, oh, that's the most expensive one that we have by the glass. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And she's like, no, you're good. It's actually great. Love that. That means, you listened the past few weeks, you were able to, you have a good taste. And I was like, I guess one day I'll regret it because it'll be expensive. But yeah, so we had that's kind of like how I got into like the whole like wine scene a little bit more. And because it was a really incredible wine bar and restaurant, I got into the wine and food pairing thing as well. And then Lisa and I went on a road trip and we stopped at the vineyard. And so it was the very first time for me actually going to a vineyard and like a full, like a legit winery and vineyard site and whatnot. And the winemaker, Daniel Schuster, and owner of the winery, he went through the whole barrel room with us and he would do a quick tasting with us too and like show some of his, single vineyard Pinots and everything. And then he walked away, came back with like a cuvee that he just put together, like 3-4 like special barrels that he chose. And he's like, try this one. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And he was like, well, this is like, our top wine. And I was just like, this is something that I want to learn. This is like so inspiring. It's like, I want to do this one day. And so I was like, can I work for you? And he's like, sure. So I started working at the winery and I called my parents and I was like, hey, I am not coming home anytime soon. I will work at this winery now. I will keep working at the restaurant. I will learn how to make wine now. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I think I called my parents, like I don't know how many times, like 3, 4, 5 times, telling them that I'm not coming home, that I changed my flight again, ended up staying for an entire year and got full into like the entire wine industry. I was like loving it. I was working in the vineyard throughout the day. I would go home, shower quickly, run to the restaurant and like work at night at the also as a waitress and still learning about wine and everything. So I was just like completely involved and I was like the happiest. It was probably one of the best years of my life too, just because I was, just out of school. Everyone was like happy at home and I was just completely able to figure out for myself which path I want to go on in my future. And wine has ever since been like the main part of my life. It was kind of cool, I guess.
Wow.
So I was lucky enough to get into the wine thing early on. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love that story and I love how it just kind of happened. Like you said, like you didn't ask for it necessarily. It just kind of happened to you, which I feel like there are so many wine stories like that where it's just like, I was going to do this thing and then it just kind of happened and I fell in love with wine and everything that it does. And it's so hard not to when you get involved with it and when you catch the wine bug. I feel like you're just like, whoa.
Totally.
Cool. And I can't step away from it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to it. There's so much to learn. And because I also love chemistry. So I was like, there's, so much chemistry to it, like all the soil science. And I was like, this is awesome. I want to learn all this too. And then later on, like now I have a wine business. So I kind of got back into the business that I actually wanted to study, like, into business school. So kind of, we'll work around.
Yeah, I love it. Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. Well, let's talk a little bit about like going from that to now having an import business. Yeah, I'm guessing it was not a straight to the import business. And you wanted to be a wine importer. How did it go? Did you ever want to do anything else in wine? Where did you think you would end up? Yeah, you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I went back to Germany after my year in New Zealand and started to study winemaking. So I did my bachelor's and master's degree in winemaking. And I worked harvest in Germany too at this time at the winery in the Mosel Valley that I now import to. And so it's kind of like, my family, it feels like my family winery. So I work with them still, and it's like awesome. Like a really cool relationship. And yeah, so I started winemaking, and then my dream was to make wine in California. I don't even know where this dream came from, but it was just something that was always stuck in my head, like something, in the back of my head. It's like, one day I got to do this. And so I worked harvest in Germany, but also had really bad eczema back then too. So I was like, not really, like the climate wasn't right for actually, me making wine in Germany. And so I actually switched my career a little bit. I worked for a fine wine importer and distributor in Germany. They focused on Italian Spanish wine. So I actually worked in sales before, and I was also trained at the office. So I had like a really cool introduction to how import works and like how the whole setup works in Germany. And then before I turned 30, I was like, I got to go to California and make wine. And so that's like when I actually ended up in California and changed my path and wanted to go and make wine in California. It's like, one day I have to do this. And I felt like it was time to do it. And so I quit my job, got rid of my apartment, and applied for an internship in California. Got the internship position for harvest of 2018, and then moved out to California. The plan was to stay 3 months. Same thing that I was planning on doing in New Zealand, just 3 months. New Zealand ended up being like a year, and California ended up being like 7 years now. So
no one's ever going to believe you anymore when you're like, I'm just going here for 3 months.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, sure, Lisa, sure.
She's never coming back.
Yeah.
So kind of what happens.
Yeah. Oh, fun.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so how did you go from winemaking in California to then now starting an import company?
So I had a work injury at the winery. So I was not able to make wine, was kind of forced to take a break. And the break ended up being over a year. And at this point, I wasn't sure if I'm able to actually go back into winemaking fully, because I had a shoulder surgery and, kind of need to be, it's a pretty physical job and I love it. But I was like, okay, what if I can't go back into winemaking? What if and I wasn't ready to go back to Germany. And I was also, just around the pandemic time was 2020. And now 2020, my injury and my surgery and stuff, it was like 2021. I was living close to the ocean. I was like, I don't want to go back to Germany now. Let's stay somewhere here and see what else I could do. And so when I was also coming from a surgery, I was like, went to quite a few wine shops around and like looked at the market and grocery stores, and I kind of talked to people about like different wine buyers and sommeliers in California, like how they see German wines. And I was like kind of surprised on how little, not knowledge necessarily, but how many wines, it's like very stereotypical sweet wines from Germany, and especially, German sweet Riesling. I'm like, well, this is interesting because it's like not what we actually drink in Germany. This is like not necessarily, we still make sweet wines over here, but not that much. And, so I was just like, interesting. And I was also like creating something from home. It was like, where, first place, I was like sick away from home. I was like, so it make me even more homesick. So I was like looking for German Riesling, but it was all sweet. And I was like, I got to change this. And so I talked to my good friends from like do a winemaking studies back in Germany. And they were kind of struggling too with the pandemic, because Germany, we have a lot of wine fests and people come to the wineries and then they go out and like, have a fun time and like buy wines and whatnot. So like the whole industry was struggling a lot too, everywhere, but also in Germany, obviously. And so I thought it would be fun to, look into the import business. So I reached out to my friends and I was like, are you interested in like, trying this with me and like going on this journey with me? And they're like, yes, we should totally try that. So I went to Germany, met with the small selection of producers that I want to work with. We tasted their wines. We kind of made like a small, first order ready. And it definitely was a lot of back and forth as well. Like, what do you buy? What works in the market? Get the licensing ready. So it was a lot of planning and researching, but also a very interesting time. I learned a lot about the alcohol and beverage industry and laws and requirements and licensing. And I was just like, this is so complicated. Like Germany is like pretty straightforward, but over here it's just like, and I found it weird difficult. But
right. Yeah, it is. It is something else over here in the US.
Oh, totally. Yeah. There's so many rules in different states and different compliances. And so, I got really deep into it to see what I could actually do. And so I had this idea of what my company to look like as an importer. And I also wanted to be able to sell directly to consumers. That was something I want to educate. I want to talk about German wines. I want you to understand why I buy certain wines. And so I had this idea of like having, being an importer, choosing the wines myself, and then having an online shop and a wine club and doing all these things. And California is actually the only state that it's possible. And I was like, well, good thing I live in California.
Yes, that's
So
right. That's a good question because
yeah.
I was wondering because I feel like a lot of importers typically the way that the 3-tier system works here in the US is that like if you import the wine, then you sell the wine to a distributor and then the distributor gets it to the restaurants and the wine shops and then that's how we buy it. But I know, yeah, with your company, I can buy directly online the
Yeah.
wine. So it sounds like California just has a little loophole in there or something that allows
Yes.
for it.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's possible if you have an online shop. Yeah, I couldn't have my own store. I couldn't have my own wine store. But also I'm traveling so much to sell my wines, to distribute my wines. I'm like, I'm fine. Like I don't know how I would manage another store.
No, I love it. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the German wine, but let's go to, I'm going to skip forward to the question on importing just because I think for a lot of people in the wine world, even when you know about wine, importing is still like, it's still a question of like, how does it get here? And so I know there are lots of details, so you don't have to go into all the details, but what does it kind of look like, starting from like, okay, I want to get this wine from Germany over to the US, and then from that to like, to me buying it and getting it in my house. Can you kind of like talk a little bit about like what that process is like? I'm so grateful to the sponsors who help make this podcast possible. And today's sponsor is one I personally love, wine.com. You know I'm all about exploring new wines, but let's be real, it's not always easy to find unique bottles, especially if you're limited to what's near you. That's why I love shopping on wine.com. They have a huge selection, wines at every price point, user-friendly search features, and real wine experts ready to help you find your next favorite bottle. And here's a special deal just for you as a podcast listener. Get free shipping on orders over $150 at wine.com/corkfizz with promo code corkfizz. My recommendation? Build a mix of 6 to 12 bottles to try. Some you know, some you've never heard of. Not sure what to pick? Message me. I'd love to help. Or take advantage of the live chat wine experts at wine.com.
Sure. So if I already work with a winery, it makes it a little bit easier. So let's, pretend that I have a winery that I purchased wines from last year. And so this year I want to reorder the same wine and also a couple new wines. The first thing I need to do is obviously taste the wines. Very important. I got to make sure the wine is good. And then I will talk to the winery and talk about the amount that you want to import, like how much I can get. Because not every winery is like a huge production. So there are certain wines that I cannot get just like whatever I want. And so, especially for wine club, I get wines exclusively for the wine club shipment. So this might be something a little bit more unique and something you definitely don't see any other restaurants, retail shops whatsoever. And then the first thing, like the next step would be getting the labels ready. So every product that you import in the United States, especially wine, has to have its own brand label, which states who imports it. There's certain requirements on how to state the alcohol content, how to put the grape variety on there. Like there's so many small things that you have to know. And when it comes to sparkling wine, it gets even more complicated. So there's like this whole back and forth sometimes. But I feel like I know how to do it now. And then something else comes up and I was like, okay, great, do it again. and you think came up. And so that's like one of the main things. Then I send the approved label to the German winery. Then they get them printed, get them ready, label the wines. And then when they tell me that the wine is ready, I will get a quote from the logistics company that I work with. And then they will send me, a pricing for the, let's say, pallet or two or the container, whatever I'm, about to order. And then they will reach out to the winery, schedule pickup. The German winery has a couple of things to get ready. And then like paperwork-wise. And then hopefully in like a timely manner, the wine will be picked up at the winery. So once the wine gets picked up, it's one thing. But then you also don't know when actually will be shipped. For example, I ordered wines in January and the wine got picked up pretty much right away. It was perfect. And I was like, it's awesome. Just before tariffs hit and everything. I was like, I get these wines over here. And then I reached out to the logistics company. I shouldn't say the name, maybe I should, I don't know. But they wouldn't tell me any shipping date. So I kept waiting and waiting. And then I went back to Germany at some point for a trade show. It was like spring, it was March, April. And then, Trump announced the tariffs of like 200% or something. I was like, okay, great. I'm getting quite some wine and I don't even know what the tariffs will look like and whatnot. So I was just like, okay, let's do something else. And, there was nothing I could do. So I was trying to come up with like a plan B and whatnot, but there was not really a plan B. I was just like, praying, hoping, I don't know what you do at this point, getting money aside somewhere. And so the wine got here in the end of May. So there's like not really like a time frame. Yeah. So it took like forever. Sometimes it takes no time. The wine can be here in like no time, in America. But sometimes it like takes forever. And so when I order smaller amounts, the wine will actually consolidate it somewhere, usually in Antwerp or Rotterdam, and then gets on a container with other wines too. And then it will be shipped to the East Coast. They will get into America, or they get aboard America in New York. And that's when they will be released to the customs. When they hit customs, when they release customs, they actually charge me, actually they take it off my bank account right away, a percentage, like a dollar amount per gallon that I import.
Wow.
So that's something that just like happens right away when a wine enters the country. It has nothing to do with like tariffs. It's just like a thing that you pay as an importer. So you pay per gallon. Yeah. So there's like, money that they take right away as well. And then the wine will be trucked from the East Coast to the West Coast. So it takes already like about 4 to 6 weeks just for the wine to leave the harbor in Europe to get to my warehouse in California. This time actually getting my own container full of wine, which should be a little bit faster. So the wine will be picked up next week at all the wineries. They all packed the wines, got them ready. And then the wine will be shipped from Antwerp through the Panama Canal around to California. They will get into America in LA, and then it will be trucked to my warehouse, which is like in California as well. So that should be much faster because I'm not going into New York first and then being trucked over and everything. So that's the one thing that, definitely helps if you have your own container space, but it also means it's, more wine. It's a bigger commitment. And especially right now with like the whole tariff situation, we will see how that will hit. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that probably had a big impact. And we've talked about that on the podcast too, of how much the tariffs are just really hitting the more on the American side than they are, the way that they're supposed to be, what the goal of the tariff would be essentially, when really it's just kind of hurting the folks like you who are, trying to bring the wine in and trying to sell and actually make some money off of the wine more than, just like how much you have to buy it for and then how much you can actually end up selling it to the consumer. Yeah, that is a challenge. And I think it's a good thing for people to keep in mind when like you see higher prices on some of the German wine versus like when you're in Germany, it's going to be way cheaper. That, it's just how it is of like how many different things have to be paid by the time it makes it over here, which even then I think your prices are ridiculously reasonable. I remember purchasing and being like, yes, I want that. And oh my gosh, I love it. So let's talk a little bit more about German wine, because you mentioned this earlier about how, before you started the import company, and I think this is true, across the board of a lot of people when they think of, especially in America, a lot of Americans, when they think of German wine, they think of sweet Riesling, and obviously there's way more than that in Germany, and being from Germany yourself, what do you think of when you think of German wine?
Well, Germany to me is one of the best wine producing countries too. Gotta be biased a little bit here on this point, but
that's fair. You're allowed to be.
Right? Yes. I lived in different places and stuff. I've seen different countries, but no. So thinking about German wines, I think about a really diverse portfolio. It comes to, really aromatic, beautiful white wines to incredible red wines as well, and then high-end sparkling wines. So to me, Germany has to offer pretty much anything that you want to drink in any occasion. There's something, we produce a wine for anything. There's not just necessarily one thing that we're really good at. Like we make these days incredible Chardonnay as well. Pinot Noir is the third biggest producer in the world. They taste amazing. Then the sparkling wines, Champagne method, for the most part, at least the ones that I import, are just like, outstanding too. So I feel like Germany, when it comes to wine, to me, it's just like a really colorful, interesting, diverse book. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
To just explore and deep dive into it.
Yes. There's way more than just the Riesling, and we need to get it over here, which you're doing, thank goodness. What about like the viticulture in Germany? I know on your website you talk a lot about farming sustainably, and there's a big focus on being, eco-friendly and all of that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I focus, as you just said, totally on sustainably farmed vineyards too. So the wineries I work with, they own their own vineyards for the most part. And you and I met with David Ziegloff before. a few months ago. It was like a really fun tasting too that we did together. And for him especially as well, he focuses on being generative. So the farming is like fully sustainable. He doesn't use any harsh chemicals when it comes to pesticides and herbicides treatments of the vines. And that is something that's like very important. And it's also gaining a lot of attention in Germany. And it's like more and more like a thing. Not necessarily being organically certified, because being certified also costs money. And depending on, like for me, especially in America, I don't need certification. And for me personally, I don't mind if the winery has certification or not. I couldn't even put it on the label because we have different requirements and laws when it comes to farming and then making organic wines versus America. I think it's always kind of interesting
right.
too.
Yes, because like organic wine, you could label it organic in Europe, but you might not be able to label it organic in America because there's different restrictions.
Yeah, so it's actually the sulfur usage. So in Germany, we can use sulfur. We use less sulfur for organic wines, but you're still allowed to use sulfur when we make the wine. And in America, if you make organic wines, you cannot add any sulfur to the wine. It has to be under 10 parts. And this is so little. So it's like, I'm like adding more sulfur. And when I moved here and looked for organic wines, because something that we would drink in Germany too, like I would look for. And it's, when I go and I buy wine, someone's like, oh, it's organic. It's cool. I'll buy that one. Over here, I was just like shocked. The quality was ridiculous. It was like really bad. But now I know why, because you just went out to use sulfur. And if you're a really good winemaker, you have a really healthy fruit that comes in, you don't really need to use sulfur. So, that's totally cool. Like David Ziegler, he barely uses any sulfur for his winemaking. The other ones using is like a bare minimum as well. I have a new winery. He's completely Demeter, biodynamically certified. Same thing. He doesn't use sulfur really for his winemaking. So there's a way to make incredible wines with like no sulfur. But if it's just like a grocery store organic wine in America where you can't use sulfur, I don't know how,
Right. You have to put in the extra
work.
work to be able to get away with not using the sulfur. I mean, that's used to, keep it stable. And if there's anything going on in the wine and if it didn't start out great, yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a problem in the US with like the organic winery, because some people just like see organic and go, I need it to be organic. And that's all they think about when it's like, it also needs to be quality wine. And, like quality plus organic would be great. Or like you said, it can be quality plus maybe not certified organic, but it comes from, all of the grapes were biodynamically farmed or from a regenerative farming situation, and that it's just as good and just as careful about the environment and taking care of everything.
Yeah. And I think the movement, like now, like just looking at organic wines or whatsoever, I think it also pushed many consumers to natural wines too. Because natural wine, you think that must be something better or of like lower chemical. Obviously, there are no, less chemicals and everything involved too. But it's also like more clear definition of natural wines too. And so it's not necessarily that natural wine is like, a better wine. But I do like the idea of questioning and getting to know the product more that you're actually consuming in any way. If it's like any food, if it's like whatever you buy to wear, the makeup you're using, the, products you put on, our hair and whatnot. So all those things that we interact with. And the same thing with like drinks and like wine too. Like it's good to ask questions. And so I do like a natural wine theme or topic, whatever it is, movement, especially for this part. Just like to, seeing consumers being more interested and like more careful and conscious about what they're consuming. I think it's very cool.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think it's so fascinating that like wine is, I mean, just as being an alcoholic product, like doesn't have to have the ingredient list on it, or like doesn't, because I think for a lot of people, it's always like, it's just made with grapes, right? And it's like, well, that's the main thing. And for a lot of wines, that's one of the only things. But there's a lot that goes in. Like you said, winemaking is chemistry. There's a lot that can happen. And if you don't start with a good, good grapes and a good product, wineries can kind of mess around with that. And they're allowed to do that. And so I totally agree. I think with the natural wine movement, what I would want to push for that is exactly what you said of like asking questions. How was it made? What did the winemaker do? And understanding that like, I was talking to a winemaker, they're up in the Okanagan in Canada yesterday, and they were talking about, we try our very best not to use pesticides or, we use as low sulfur as we can. But if something happens, we want to be able to respond to it so we still get a good, great product. And I think that's true for like, I was visiting a farmer up in Beaujolais and he said the same thing, that like, it's great to be able to be certified biodynamic, But honestly, they were spraying copper on the vines, and for them, they had to do it so many times, and even then they still lost so much of their crop because it rained so much. And so I think understanding that, just being completely organic or being completely this doesn't always mean the wine is better. Understanding why they have to do something is helpful.
Oh, totally. And then at the same time, I just said too, sometimes you need to do something else because it's still your business. If you lose everything, then you lose your business too, eventually. So
Yes.
yeah, it has to be like a healthy balance too. And we all got to do our best as well and, get a good product and everything. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's an interesting field. We could go really deep into this one.
I know, right? We're totally nerding out. Let's go back to you. You already talked a little bit about kind of how you choose your wines, but it sounds like in terms of choosing the wines that you import, you taste all of them before they come over. Beyond that, how do you find the producers that you like to work with?
So my very first producers that I started working with, I met doing my winemaking studies. And so that they happen to be really good friends of mine too, but they're also really good winemakers. I wouldn't just work with you just because you're my friend. I also need to like your wine, obviously. Yeah, so I started working with like those producers that I met doing my winemaking studies, and I obviously know really well how they work and what they've done and like where they came from too, which is like very cool. So, when I studied back in Germany, then now be tasting all these wines and talking to them and see how far they, you know, evolved and like developed the companies and the businesses and took over their parents' production and everything. That was something really intriguing too and like really interesting to see. And also, it's kind of cool to have the story behind all these wines that I import too and the connection to the wineries. And, I know some of the grandparents too. And I know the families and the dads, I know the kids too. So it's kind of cool. And then right now, when I go to Germany, I usually go at least once or twice a year. This is like my second time in Germany this year. So what I do is I go to big trade shows. I talk to a bunch of sommeliers that I meet and I go out for dinner or something. I travel, I talk to my winemakers to see if they have any, if they have like some recommendations, if there's anything that they think I should taste too. And then just go to, all the wineries and get an idea about what's happening. And then usually I like to taste wineries over a certain period of time. So not just like once and then go and buy them. So I want to taste them at the trade show, then I go and visit them at the winery. I go to the vineyards with them. I retaste the wines. I sometimes even get samples shipped to America to taste them again too. Show them to a few friends, to a few wine buyers and sommeliers and get a feel for it too. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is great. I need to have this. That happens too. Because sometimes you have to be fast as well. There's certain wineries that you feel like this is so cool. If I don't get this now, someone else might, get on this one. And yeah, so that's like one of the processes too. But then it's also very important, like the quality of the wine, obviously, how they farm, but also the connection to the person behind the wine, the family, the winemaker, the philosophy, especially because if you import wine, there's so much that you have to talk to with the winery, I feel like, about too. So it's like getting a labels ready. You have to talk about paperwork, pricing. You got to make sure that you get along well, that you can talk business, but also have a good relationship when it comes to being, just like work together too, and like become maybe even like friends and everything too. So I get along really well with everyone I work with, and I love it too. And because I have to write tasting notes, I have to talk to them regularly. I want them to support me with like their social media, link me in their content, send me photos during harvest so I can reuse them as well for when I want to talk about their wineries. And so it's like a lot of like communication between all these wineries and like a constant staying up to date as well. I need harvest updates. I'm now here doing harvest, which is awesome. And I can't be at every winery at the same time now too. So I kind of rely on them to give me feedback and information and stuff. So I think like the personal relationship also plays a big role too.
Yeah. And I think that's so special about being able to buy wines directly from you, because I know that you have that relationship with the winery, and I know that you've gone through and you've tasted all of these, and it's just this like confidence that I think a lot of people are afraid of trying new wines, right? Because they're like, what if I don't like it? And it's like, well, at least with like buying from like a small importer or a small wine shop, like, they've tasted most of those wines. And even if it might not be exactly your cup of tea, it's going to be good. It's going to be good quality because they chose to bring it over here. And so I think that's really special. And also having that relationship, like you said, and because I think as an importer, you are representing that winery to everyone here in the US. And so it's really important that you understand their ethos behind making the wines and are able to, share that with all of us.
Yeah, totally. Really special. And I wanted to come and visit too. Like a market visit is really important too. the winemakers are interested to see how America market looked like and how it works, and meeting some of my wine buyers that I work with over here. So it's like a really cool thing if you get along well and they can come over and travel and like get to know my, or like my favorite restaurants that I work with or whatsoever. Yeah, get an idea and a feel for the market, because then we can again talk differently about which wines could work, and maybe they have something that I feel like this might be a cool one for you to try based on what I just, experienced or whatsoever. And also they understand better why I buy certain wines over other wines.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Oh, I think that's so cool. So interesting. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. If you're in the US, be sure to check out Lisa's wine selection and her online store. You can go to tupetzwine.com, that is TUPETZ wine.com, and use a 15% off code especially for you as a listener, CorkFizz15. That's CorkFizz and the number 15, 15. If you love this episode as much as I did, I would so appreciate if you have not yet, just take a quick second, pull your phone out, or if you're on your computer, there's usually a spot where you can rate it, either just, the star selection, you can just leave a rating, or if you're on Apple Podcasts, you can also do a rating and a review. Let me know what you're loving about the podcast. And I think on Spotify, maybe you can leave a comment, just say what was something interesting that you found in this episode. In next week's episode, you'll hear part 2 of my interview with Lisa, where we talk about the sparkling wine from Germany you absolutely need to try, plus top tips from Lisa on finding the best versions of this sparkling wine. We'll also talk about a unique grape variety that nearly went extinct but is now being used to make some delicious wines. We'll also talk about how Lisa manifested getting her wine on one of, if not the, top wine list in the world. And of course, so much more. Thanks again for listening, and if you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. And if you're interested in exploring new wines and joining an incredible community of wine lovers, be sure to sign up for my virtual tasting club, The Cork Crew. Head to thecorkcrew.com to learn more and use code WINESPECIAL to get your first 2 months for just $8 a month. Cheers!